Everybody who serves in the military has some great stories of adventure that we love to share and regale our friends and family with. In the Navy, we call these sea stories. Whatever your branch of service, however, all of these stories have their beginning somewhere. And for enlisted personnel, this is a place we call boot camp. Stay tuned.
I originally enlisted in 1992 and reported to Marine Corps Recruit Depot in Parris Island, South Carolina, where I was assigned to 1st Battalion Platoon 1050. One day, while we were performing drill movements on the parade deck in preparation for our graduation pass and review, I mistakenly broke the position of attention and swatted a sand flea on my neck, which caught the attention of my drill instructor. I was then instructed to pick up said deceased sand flea and double time back to the sand pit, where I proceeded to dig a trench for Sandy and afterwards play taps for his burial service. Godspeed, Sandy. Godspeed.
Hello, welcome to Pierside here on Sparks 1524. I'm Nathaniel Miller. Recruit Training Command, or RTC, is the Navy's general induction command that trains enlisted sailors. Now, RTC had its beginnings following the Spanish-American War when the Navy began training enlisted personnel up in the Great Lakes region. And in fact, Naval Station Great Lakes was at the forefront of naval racial integration. In 1942, the Navy opened the general ranks of enlisted sailors to African American individuals, and they began training at Great Lakes. And the famous Golden 13, the Navy's first 13 black officers, were trained up at Naval Station Great Lakes. There were a number of boot camps that were established across the country for the Navy following World War II, but in the era of budget cuts that went on in the late 20th century, the Navy is now down to just the one boot camp, RTC, which is still aboard Naval Station Great Lakes. I have actually never talked about my boot camp experiences, and there's a couple of reasons for this. The first one's pretty obvious. Once you're in the fleet and you've launched F-14 Tomcats off a flight deck in wartime, you've explored Japanese caves from World War II that still had live explosives and human remains inside. You've hung off the bow of USS Ponce photographing dolphins diving through the bow wave, and you've been the chief military editor for Fleet Week New York, the Navy's biggest annual public outreach. Boot camp kind of fades into the background. Another reason was I honestly shoved a lot of those memories into the background because I thought I was a coward and a weakling. I was not diagnosed with autism until I was 51 years old. I'm 52 now, so I've only been living with this diagnosis and understanding its ramifications for the last 12 months. Autism in the 70s, 80s, and even early 90s wasn't recognized or understood very well. And except for individuals who are completely locked up in their own head, or the famous autistic savant, the spectrum just wasn't understood. As it turns out, I'm actually pretty damn deep on the spectrum, but I was always just outside what was recognized. A lot of my boot camp experiences were kind of shrouded in that misunderstanding of myself. But my Navy story, like everybody else's, has to start somewhere, and that somewhere is Recruit Training Command, located next to Lake Michigan aboard Naval Station Great Lakes, Illinois.
I was on the what we call balls to four watch, which was midnight to 4 o'clock in the morning. And so about 3:50 in the morning, we looked at the watch bill and realized that nobody was on the watch bill for the remainder of the night after 4 o'clock in the morning. So being the geniuses that we were, we figured, oh, that's the end of our shift. Time to go to bed. So that's what we did. We're woken up so very gently by the boot camp instructors, And that was when I learned the fifth general order, which is I will quit my post only when properly relieved. We were informed that we were not properly relieved, so we were not supposed to quit our post. So for the next hour and a half to 2 hours, we underwent intensive training, which the rest of us just called getting beat, which was up downs or push ups, sit ups, 8 counts, mountain climbers, jumping jacks, and any other kind of physical training the instructors wanted to tell us to do. The entire time we were repeating the fifth general order. Towards the end of boot camp, one day I was tired and I decided I would be real smart and clean under my rack to make sure there were no dust bunnies under there, because that was a big thing. Problem is, that was just my way of taking a nap. A while later, I wake up, turn and look, and one of my RDCs is on the ground, head on her hands, looking at me, and she just smiles and says, "Morning, sunshine." I said, "Good morning, petty officer." And she replied, "Toes on the gun line," which was never something you wanted to hear. Luckily, it was towards the end, and the RDCs were being kind of cool with us. So we only did about a half hour of what we called rack drills, which was tearing apart our rack and putting them back together. And then after that, we went to dinner. It could have been much worse, but I still just remember the look on her face.
I joined the Navy on September 16th, 1997. Now, before the first 48 hours of boot camp can happen, I have to get there. I had been living in Tallahassee, so I'd already moved out of my apartment, put my stuff in storage, and I was staying with some friends, and the recruiter was going to pick me up and drive me to Jacksonville. So he picked me up about 8 or 9 in the morning on September 15th, 1997. It's about a 3-hour drive to Jacksonville from Tallahassee. So we got there. I checked into the hotel that the Navy provided. The next day, the bus would pick me up and take me to the military entrance processing station. I was terrified. I was shaking. I was sweating. I just wanted to go home. I felt like I was going to be executed the next day. I distracted myself that night by going across the street to a movie theater and saw George of the Jungle starring Brendan Fraser. That was the last film I ever saw as a civilian. My first 48 hours really began when I got up about 3 o'clock in the morning on September 16th. Packed up my meager belongings and went down to have breakfast. The hotel actually had an early continental breakfast put out for us recruits, and then the bus came to take us to the Military Entrance Processing Station, or MEPS. MEPS are regional processing stations around the country, and they in process recruits from all five, well, six branches of service now, but in 97 it was only five branches. The Space Force was still far in the future. So we got there about 6:30 in the morning, walk in the door, and we start getting shuffled around. Navy goes this way, Air Force here, Army, Marine Corps, Coast Guard, and we start in processing. And it's a day full of paperwork and talking to people to make sure you want to do this, followed by paperwork, followed by talking to people to make sure you want to do this, followed by paperwork. A medical exam, that's a funny story. That's when I found out I had wisdom teeth. I'm sitting there in the dentist chair, and the dentist is checking the fillings I have, making sure they're secure, there's no new cavities, the usual. Huh. Seaman Recruit Miller. They're already calling me Seaman Recruit Miller, even though I haven't officially sworn in yet. Seaman Recruit Miller, you've got all your wisdom teeth. My first thought was, crap. And I asked him, do I have to get them out before boot camp or can I wait till I'm in the fleet? Miller, you don't need to worry about it. You got the biggest mouth I've ever seen. We had a light lunch around noon, and about noon 30 or 1300, 1 o'clock, we had the swearing in ceremony. So we all trooped over to the auditorium. And at this point, we're not broken into Navy, Army, or anything. We're just one big glut of new recruits. I was not expecting my parents to show up. I grew up here in Florida in a little town called Niceville, and it's a 6-hour drive from Jacksonville. And I'd already told them I might be able to talk to him for maybe 10 or 15 minutes after the swearing in ceremony before I get whisked to the airport. I just wasn't expecting them to make a 12-hour drive, round trip. Walk in the auditorium, and there's Mom and Dad. It was the one moment in that whole first 24 hours that I felt good. So we all get ready to swear in, but before we raise our hand, the lieutenant, and it was a Navy lieutenant conducting this ceremony, gave us a little idea of what we're going to face. I still remember these exact words. Quote, "You will be sleep deprived and stress induced," unquote. Got to spend a few minutes with Mom and Dad after the ceremony, get on the bus, go to the airport. Now, I'm wearing shorts and a t-shirt. I grew up in the tropics. It's September in Florida. It's still balmy. T-shirt and shorts more than enough. Except I'm heading to Chicago in September. I was freezing on the airplane. I had a little thin blanket. Couldn't sleep. I think we landed at O'Hare around 9 or 10 that night. We get on the buses that we're directed to, and we call them in the Navy Recruit Division Commanders, or RDCs. That's our version of a drill sergeant. And they're petty officers or chief petty officers. There were 3 buses, maybe 4, to take us from the airport to boot camp. As we get on them and sit down, the RDCs come aboard and start yelling at us. I do remember seeing some people around me looking shocked or disorientated. I was really detached. I hadn't slept since 3 that morning because, unlike everybody else on that airplane, I'd been freezing. So I was really completely exhausted. We'd had very little to eat. At this point, I'm kind of feeling like I'm watching a television documentary on boot camp, but I really don't feel like I'm there yet.
I do remember as it was snowing there, and we were in Ship 12, which was at the very, very back, the old World War II barracks, way in the back. I'm sure they're probably gone. We call those, open bay, asbestos barracks, whatever you want to call them. But I got really sick when I was in boot camp. A lot of us did. I think there was about 50 of us, and 26 of us got pneumonia while we were in there. I got pneumonia so bad that I ended up not telling, the RDCs, because I didn't want to get asthma, because I knew that would, set me back. I didn't want to either get set back for a week or get set back to week 1. So I was kind of struggling through it about halfway through when I started getting pneumonia. So it was a struggle, just getting through the basic training portion. Now, I do remember when we did our battle stations, which is usually the last quote unquote test that we do in boot camp there. I remember vividly that I was having very, very difficult time breathing, because at the time I had already had pneumonia probably close to a month, so it was getting bad. But on the Liberty weekend, I ended up going across the road over there to the medical center in Great Lakes. She took some x-rays, the officer over there, the medical officer, and she said, yeah, you got a 2-inch spot of pneumonia in your left lung. She's like, well, you want to know the good news and you want to know the bad news? Which one do you want to know first? I said, well, give me the good news. She's like, well, you're alive. So I was like, oh, okay. She's like, bad news is that's the largest spot of pneumonia I've ever seen on a living patient. So yeah, I was pretty close to being, checking out, so to speak. And I remember when we were doing our last checks, when we're standing at our bed and standing at attention, the RDC was walking around and he's looking at everybody and he's eyeballing everybody as he's walking around. And he walks up to me, he does a about face, and he looks at me and says, you don't look good, man.
The receiving hall at RTC is a gorgeous structure, and the first passageway that we were in, they separated us into 2 lines, standing at attention, facing each other. The RDCs are going through and pulling our orders, which we're carrying in manila envelopes, and they're starting to sort us and shuffle us around. The very first thing we did after that was a urinalysis. Go pee in a cup. And the Navy takes this stuff seriously. I remember the next day, about 5 or maybe 6 recruits were gone after the urinalysis. They had analyzed it that fast. We got a phone call home. We had to stand at attention and wait for permission to pick up the phone and call our parents. But I got through to mom and dad real quick, let them know I'm alive and that I'm okay. And then I hang up and we get on with the process. One of the guys that ended up in my division was named Jason, and this kid was about 6'6", second tallest guy I ever ran into in the Navy. Jason had my undying respect from the moment we got off that airplane, because I realized that the first time I saw him was at the airport. He showed up to boot camp with bright blue hair. His hair was the color of my studio background, maybe even a little brighter. He caught hell from every RDC and their Aunt Susan from O'Hare Airport all the way through our first haircut. We've got all this basic processing done. Now we're in our Smurfs. This is our first uniform. It's a set of blue sweats. We call them Smurfs. It's also when we were issued these recruit ball caps. Now, unfortunately, this is the only ball cap I have that is not an original to my career. I got rid of the recruit ball cap when we graduated boot camp, and I wish I kept it, but I didn't. So I got myself another one just to complete my command ball cap collection. We finally get to the galley around 5 in the morning. So now I've been up over 24 hours. We crowd in the galley, and this is the first place I find warmth. I was freezing on the airplane. I was freezing in the receiving hall. Now I'm wearing sweats, and I'm in a building that's stifling, and I'm dehydrated, and I'm hungry, and we're all stressed and scared, but I'm dealing with a level probably more than most people. Not a good combination. But then I heard somebody singing. There was an African American female up in the serving line, and she was singing, "Pancakes for my shipmate, bacon for my shipmate, ooh, waffles for my shipmate." Trust me, her voice was way better than mine. Turns out she was a recruit. 1 week during boot camp, you do service week, which is where your division goes and works around the base. And this is usually midway through training. So she's a recruit like us. She was up as early as we are. She'd already been through PT and all that. Now she's working, serving food. And she is clearly bound and determined to have a good time and start our day off on a high note. It's the first time I really understood the wisdom of finding beauty in the darkness, finding a perfect moment of peace in an otherwise stressful situation. And that's a lesson that took with me through my whole career. And then I fainted.
Some kid, for whatever reason, didn't want to select or elect for the GI Bill. He was called up in front of everyone and just sort of given I don't know, like, here's your intro to boot camp sort of thing. I had already been to college. I wasn't really looking to do the GI Bill. It's money taken out of your pay for like 12 months. But I checked it. There was no way I was not going to elect to take it. And in the end, I'm glad I did. It was something I was able to pass on to my children. So in hindsight, good idea. So thank you to whoever that RDC was who sort of berated that poor kid in front of everybody else and made me take the GI Bill. I remember we were sitting there, I think it was mid-May sometime right after we got there, maybe just 2 or 3 weeks after we got there. We were sitting in there and one of the RDCs was going over something. And I remember the second one, he came running in, he stopped everything and, he spread the news, or he let us know that Admiral Borda had died. And I didn't really know much about Admiral Borda other than he was the CNO at the time and we were having to learn, the chain of command. It wasn't until later I found out what a great impact he'd had on sailors. He was known as the sailor's sailor. He's the person who, I think, he changed the sailors' creed from blue jackets to Navy. He really believed that all service members, all sailors, right? You were a sailor first and you were your rank second. It didn't matter if you were enlisted or officer, right? You were a sailor first and foremost. And I could tell that his death really had an impact on the RDCs at the time. And it wasn't later until I found out, everything he had done for the sailors.
I dropped like a rock. Now we're packed in so tight, we're packed in nut to butt. I didn't hit the deck, the guys caught me, but I remember hearing her singing. And I remember my knees wobbling. And next thing I know, I'm sitting in a chair by one of the tables drinking water, or trying to, and there's a couple of corpsmen. I know, I saw it at boot camp, I saw it in the fleet. I know people malinger. I know, especially at boot camp, you have a lot of recruits that feign illness or injury, but I've got dilated pupils, a thready pulse, clammy skin, and I know they recorded that because I'm listening to one of the corpsmen writing that down. Pupils dilated, pulse thready, whatever the pulse was, and they're treating me like I'm shirking. The worst part is every time I tried to take a drink of water, one of them would cut in and demand me to tell them something, but I could not speak. This is another trait I never understood in myself growing up until getting diagnosed with autism last year. When I would get upset, it's not difficult for me to speak because I'm so emotional. I physically cannot speak. I can hear the words in my head, but none of the machinery works. That's an autism trait. It's a result of the brain jamming up because of the overstimulation. So not only can I not get a drink of water down, these guys are demanding things that I can't even answer because I cannot speak. It was not a pleasant morning.
I was late to arrive, so I actually didn't get that big welcome that most recruits do, where they have to pick up their bags, drop their bags, stand in line, and generally get screamed at by the technical instructors or the TIs. My dad had gone through basic training for the Air Force during the Vietnam War. He was never sent to Vietnam, but he did go through basic training and then on to Turkey for his assignment. He had told me that the technical instructors, or the drill instructors at that time, as they were called, were known to get physical with the recruits. They would kick or punch them or shove them, and generally just be physical with them. So as I was going to basic training, I was expecting to be slapped, pushed around, maybe even hit. And I was a little bit anxious about that, I'll admit. When I got to basic training, it didn't take long for me to realize that that was no longer the case. I think within the first 3 days, we were all standing in formation and they were teaching us the proper way to salute. And one of the TIs came up to me, got in my face real close and said, "Permission to touch." And I really didn't know what to make of that. I wasn't sure I was hearing right. I was kind of flummoxed. And the TI repeated, "Permission to touch, airman." And so I said, "Permission granted." And the TI moved my hand so that it was in the proper salute. And at that point, I realized there was not going to be any physical contact between the recruits and the TIs. And at that point, I relaxed and I kept my head down and basically did what my dad had advised me to do, which was volunteer for nothing, keep quiet, and keep your head down, which worked pretty well for the rest of basic training. Unfortunately, I did contract chickenpox my 3rd week there, and they quarantined me immediately in the hospital. I was given my own hospital room. The doctors and the TIs that came to see me were all kitted up like I was some sort of biological warfare experiment. It was pretty funny. My heart rate dropped down into the 40s, and they were worried about me because I was running a high fever. But I was in the hospital for a week or so, and then they rolled me back to a different flight since my flight had progressed, of course. They were on like week 5. I got rolled back to week 3, and the TIs actually treated me okay once they realized that I wasn't being rolled back for some disciplinary infraction, but rather due to illness. I found out later that chickenpox was a real threat to basic training. They were concerned that it was going to become an epidemic. So that's why they were so quick to quarantine me. I was the first female through the obstacle course. And when I got to the largest water obstacle, which we had to run and jump and grab a rope and swing across the water and land on the other side and then continue going, and it was just monkey bars after that. Well, I got through the rope part, and they needed a female observer, someone who could swim, to watch over the rest of the recruits as they came through the obstacle course. So I got stationed there at the rope swing, and there was a recruit that came through who was terrified of the water. And she was acting squirrely before she ran and jumped for the rope. And then she missed the rope. She fell in the water. Now, the water was only waist deep. But for someone that's unfamiliar with the water or scared, it was a really big deal. And she panicked she actually started to drown. So she went under the water, even though the water was only waist deep, because she didn't realize she could put her feet down. So the TI said, get in there. And so I jumped in and I just grabbed her around the waist and I took her over to the side and I said, put your feet down. And then when she didn't listen very well, I kind of yelled it in her ear and she put her feet down and she stopped panicking and struggling and trying to climb me. And she was able to get out and continue the rest of the obstacle course.
The Navy names the barracks after various ships to inculcate a sense of heritage. Everybody was hoping they'd get into the USS Constitution or the USS Arizona for obvious reasons. My division ended up in USS Dwight D. Eisenhower, which began the most odd dance I have ever danced with a ship. Twice during my career, I had orders to report aboard USS Dwight D. Eisenhower as part of the ship's company, and both times they got canceled and I got new orders somewhere else. I finally deployed aboard the Eisenhower in 2012. I was leading a SEOP detachment to augment the ship's media center. The first ship I served on symbolically was the barracks USS Dwight D. Eisenhower boot camp. The last ship I ever served aboard, last ship I ever deployed aboard, was the real-life aircraft carrier USS Dwight D. Eisenhower in 2012. After I deployed that deployment, I rolled to shore duty and then eventually retired. We had 3 RDCs. Chief Canales, who was a chief hull technician. They are experts in welding and ship structures. They are also your plumbers. Hull technicians are second only to damage controlmen in their knowledge of damage control techniques. Petty Officer Wilson, a bosun's mate first class. Bosun's mates are experts in deck seamanship, line handling, ship handling, basic navigation, not to the level of a quartermaster, but basic navigation, scraping and painting, all the fun stuff. And IC2 Moore, he was, Petty Officer Moore was a trainee, so he wasn't a full RDC. Chief Canales is one of the 2 or 3 greatest chiefs I ever met in my career. Slow talking country guy. I'm proud to be part of the world's finest nuclear-powered Navy. Okay, that's how he talked. It was awesome. He delayed his retirement for nearly a year just to get my division through. He was supposed to retire in early 97, looked at the training schedule and saw that 501, my division, was going to be short an RDC to have Petty Officer Wilson trying to take care of us while also training Petty Officer Moore. So Chief Canales delayed his retirement to make sure my division had proper leadership through boot camp. Like I said, in many ways, he set the model of what a chief petty officer is supposed to be.
My experience in basic training was not especially exciting, or really all that memorable. During my time in basic training, I believe the intent is to break people down, get rid of individual personalities, build everybody up as a high-functioning team, and then graduate a group of airmen. And that's precisely what we did. By the time we graduated, we were definitely slimmer, trimmer, and certainly had that unity of mind that the Air Force sought to instill. I guess it was so good that I did go back and try it again later. So in 2006, I decided to commission with the Air Force and went back to training, did the whole thing over again. What was interesting is a lot of the same problems, the same situations arose, but our mechanism to solve those problems were a little bit different in officer training school. So at BMT, as a young trainee, we were presented with problems and then told how to solve them and had to respond quickly. Did as we were told, and all was good. In the officer training school, we were presented with very similar problems, but we had to devise the solution ourselves. I found that to be significantly more stressful, even though the overlying problem was really nearly the same. Having done it twice, I don't think I would ever go back for a third try, but it was successful enough in getting me to where I am today.
although boot camp was pretty regimented, a lot of the memories that I've had and that my shipmates and my friends have told me about their own stories kind of are just free floating. One night somewhere in there, I was standing fire watch. I was up at the front end of the compartment, and one of our pastimes when we stood this watch was reading the poster of the 11 General Orders of a Century that stood across from us on the wall and memorizing it. Well, I'm on the 5th General Order, reading it about the 2000th time, when somebody, and I don't know who, from way back at the end of the compartment suddenly screams, "Miller!" I go running back in there, and nobody's awake. Don't know who screamed, don't know what they were having a nightmare about or how the hell I was involved in it, but nobody woke up. The other watch, the other fire watch who was at the aft end of the berthing was on their round, so it was just me in there, and nobody woke up. It started snowing in October, and some of the best memories I have are of watching it snow out the windows when I was standing those late watches. And those were some of those moments of finding beauty in the darkness, finding peaceful moments in the middle of all this craziness. Thus endeth my first 48 hours of boot camp. Hell, the first 24 hours alone were quite a doozy, and it only got more exciting from there. We had a cheating scandal in week 4 or week 6. We had 2 physical readiness tests, and the first one didn't even count. It was just a marker to show recruits what they needed to work on for the final test before graduation. 2 of our guys cheated on the sit-ups and got caught. We're all waiting for them to get thrown out of the division, if not boot camp, because it had been drilled into us since we arrived. There was one unforgivable sin, and that was cheating on anything. Cheating violated all 3 Navy core values, honor, courage, and commitment at the same time. So we're waiting for these guys to get thrown out. Well, the senior chief petty officer, who was kind of in charge of the whole USS Dwight D. Eisenhower berthing, gave them a very stern talking to. They were bad boys and never do this again. A lot of us had the wind taken out of our sails when that happened. It felt like we got stabbed in the back by senior leadership. All this crap we're going through was suddenly meaningless. What's the point if you violate the rules and you get a talking to and that's it? Chief Canales and Petty Officer Wilson kind of saved the situation for us as best they could. I don't know what he said to them, but Chief Canales pulled both those guys behind closed doors and somehow put the fear of God in them. And he and Petty Officer Wilson kept a weather eye on those 2 knuckleheads the rest of boot camp. I don't know what happened to them. They graduated with us, and they didn't get in trouble after that. I hope they went on and had really good careers. Outside that first 48 hours, though, the cheating scandal, or me even getting sick with the Ricky crud, anything dealing with recruits is called Ricky. And I got the Ricky crud good. You have college kids go to college and pack into a dorm, they get sick. People jump onto a cruise ship. A lot of times, cold goes through the ship. Same thing at boot camp. I got the Ricky crud good. Had a 103.2 fever. It was over 103, highest fever I've ever had that I know about. Spent 2 or 3 days shivering in my rack in the berthing, and miserable is being alone at 11 o'clock in the morning in an open bay berthing that can house up to 90 men, shivering with a fever and chills by yourself. I would so much rather have been on the grinder getting the crap beat out of me by the RDCs with the rest of the division. But those stories are not the one that jumps out at me once the first 48 hours are over. The one memory that jumps out at me was a game of 4D chess I played with Petty Officer Wilson one morning. This memory really embodies my boot camp experience. In fact, it really embodies what boot camp is supposed to be and do for recruits of all services.
Boot camp memory that I have that's the funniest one is when I went to boot camp, we were in dungarees, so we had the bell bottoms. But we had to wear a guard belt with our canteens. And every night we had to make sure our canteen was empty. Well, guess what? I forgot to empty my canteen one night, and the roving watch, we all looked out for each other, would let us know if we let our canteen wasn't empty. Well, they woke me up in the middle of the night to tell me my canteen wasn't empty, and I chugged 3/4 of a canteen in the middle of the night. Woke up the next morning and was wondering why I had to go to the bathroom so bad. Then my bunkmate and the roving watch had told me, yeah, you chugged an entire bottle of canteen in the middle of the night and I don't remember a single bit of it. And that explains why I had to go so bad in the morning. But they said I chugged that thing like the bottle was no tomorrow.
So I was roving security watch, and had to go report to the OOD. And we always heard about stuff with sandwiches and how you responded. I just knew to respond with their rank and end with their rank. So I didn't know what they meant by sandwich it. So I went there, said my stuff, roving security watch, reporting. Chief said to report. I reported, then he said, all right, put down your salute. I did that, but I forgot to say aye, aye, Chief. Kept on forgetting it. He said, put it back up, put it back down, kept on forgetting it. So another chief was in there. He went, slammed his hand on the board, and he said, this is what you're supposed to say. And he kept on saying, wanted me to say, I don't care, Chief. And the chief kept on asking, he was like, I want a sandwich. I didn't understand the sandwich thing, so I was so confused. Like, why is a chief asking me for a sandwich this entire time? I was so confused. And then what happened after that was, once I was done, you have to wait to be dismissed. He had me standing at attention for 20 minutes, and I was just standing there waiting with military bearing for like 20 minutes. I'm like, dang. And then he's just looking at me, going back to his computer, writing, looking at me, and then he said finally dismissed. So about face, walked out. I walked back to my compartment. They're like, what happened? I was like, I messed up. it was just so funny.
One night I was sleeping, and ended up sleeping just like this, and I was flat on my back, and next thing you know, I sat up and sat back down, and my bunkmate was my roving watch. He said he saw me do that, and it scared him like no tomorrow, that I just sat up in my bed, looked around, and then sat back down in the middle of the night.
So this was like beginning of boot camp. We got in our actual like boot camp out of P days. I guess I had a nightmare or something, because I woke everybody up. Because I woke up saying, no, no! And I woke everybody up. And then I heard about it in the morning. They were like, are you good? I'm just, what happened? You started saying no in your sleep. And it was just confusing to me.
We've survived our first 48 hours of boot camp. It's time to buckle down and do what everybody's told us to do. Keep our heads down, do what we're told, when we're told, and otherwise don't get noticed. Great plan. Except when the RDCs call you in the office and tell you that you are now part of divisional leadership. Stay tuned.
I was on Firewatch, and I was at the forward of, I was forward berthing, and near the RDC's office. And I had to balls the floor, and I remember fighting, falling asleep. I remember hearing the door close. I don't remember hearing it open, but I heard the door close, and the RDC is like right in front of me. So I must have been like half asleep with my eyes open, because I didn't hear the door open, nothing. You know, it's pitch black out. And this RDC, his name was Chief House. And he had a short stature. He was maybe like 5'4", 5'5", but real stocky. You know, like you want to pick a fight with him type of a guy. And I remember he had a gold tooth, and he always wore sunglasses. So he walks up to me. He's like, recruit, follow me. So I'm like kind of nervous, you know. So I follow him. We walk to the aft end of berthing, and we walk up to the other fire watch, and he's like standing there asleep. And he RDC asked me, he goes, recruit, does this recruit look like he's asleep to you? And I said, it looks that way to me. And he goes, okay, go take your post. Next day, that guy was gone. He got rolled back.
Hello, welcome to part 2 of And So It Begins here on Sparks 1524. I'm Nathaniel Miller. Well, we're in boot camp, and we're going to keep our heads down. At least that's what everybody tells you to do. We were Division 501. Our sister division, 502, berthed across the P-way from us in the same berthing. For training, sometimes 501 will be on our own, 502 on their own, but most of the time we would fall out in the morning on the grinder. They would give us the command to combine, and 501, 502 would merge together to become Division 501 combined on that second day. So it would be September 18th, 1997. The RDCs, Chief Canales, Petty Officer Wilson, and Petty Officer Moore are in the office. The office is we called it a fishbowl, small little office at the forward end of our berthing, big old window that the RDCs could look out and see mostly what's in the compartment. Now, once you go down 3 or 4 racks, between the racks and the columns holding up the building roof, you can't see very far back. That's important for later. We were all standing at our racks at attention, and Chief Canales calls somebody in the office. I don't remember who. He goes in, comes back out. Somebody else is called in, they come back out. I get called in. Seaman Recruit Miller, report. Frick. I go and report. Chief Canales is looking at my service record. Seaman Recruit Miller, so you have a degree in Florida State. Why the fuck aren't you an officer? I told Chief Canales, one, I needed a job really fast. The job market stunk, and getting into an officer program would have taken over another year. I needed a paycheck. Besides, if I went on to become an officer, I told him I wanted to know what sailor's life was like on the enlisted side, because that could only make me a better leader. Chief Canales says, well, let's see, you managed a bookstore for a church. Not bad. Did the drill forklift. You would make a great RPOC. The RPOC is the Recruit Chief Petty Officer. They are the recruit in charge of the division. Then you also have the AROC, Assistant Recruit Chief Petty Officer, who's the assistant in charge of the division. But Chief Canales says, you would be great for both of those, but I need to give that leadership to some of these young guys who are right out of high school and never did anything. You're going to be the yeoman. Crap. Petty Officer Wilson hands me a big canvas messenger bag that's going to get slung over my shoulder. And he tells me that bag is never to leave my sight or possession. If I'm asleep, it is to be hanging in the office. If I am awake, it is to be either on me or within grabbing distance. I handled all the squadron paperwork. I began my love affair with plain green logbooks at this point because I had to keep one and record everything that's going on. In addition, in this bag went my Ricky notebook. If you recall from part 1, anything to do with recruits is called Ricky. You get sick, it's the Ricky crud. You are trying to smooth out wrinkles with your hand before inspection. This is your Ricky iron. Your notebook is your Ricky notebook. This is the notebook we take all our notes in, and the back several pages are stamped with passes. If you have to leave the division alone, you have to have a pass signed by the RDC or the instructor of whatever class you're in. This is where that canvas bag will come into play. The canvas bag I would wear as yeoman, and another recruit named Jake, who became a very good friend of mine, would wear as the educational petty officer. Those canvas messenger bags were our passes. I don't know if divisional yeomen and educational petty officers today in 2024 still use those bags as their passes. We did in 1997. And you know, those bags were better than Lilo's multipass from the Fifth Element.
Miss, multipass.
If we're marching around the base with that bag on and something in the bag, everybody assumed we were working. That's going to be important for later, too.
I think my best boot camp story has got to be when our laundry PO decided to say, oh yeah, to one of our RDCs, and he proceeded to just tear into him, and after that he became the Kool-Aid man, and every time he walked by, our RDC would look at him and go, oh yeah, and he got beat until that boy was crying. I'm talking crying like a baby.
My parents dropped me off at the Naval Recruiter Station in Frederick, Maryland, and then proceeded to drive down to Florida for their vacation. I went from waiting to go to the airport, to flying out of BWI to Chicago, to sitting around a USO while waiting for others to arrive, to getting on a bus at night to drive up to Great Lakes. Up until that point, everyone was nice and cordial until we were met by an RDC running onto the bus and screaming for us to, quote, "Get the fuck off my bus," unquote. From there, we were thrown into boot camp mode. Processing took all night, and up until that point, I had never felt more tired. I also remember not being able to make the phone call to my parents to let them know that I had arrived since I didn't know how to reach them at their vacation site in Florida. For the first couple of weeks, boot camp was stressful for me. It felt as close to prison to me as anything that I imagined at that time, but something happened after the third week. I actually had a little breakdown from getting frustrated with having to constantly restart exercises because we weren't doing it as a team. Once I regained my composure, something clicked for me. I was able to see that boot camp was more simple than I had thought. I was able to see the games being played by the RDCs, and I understood that, even though these games were frustrating, they got us to work together and operate in a way that was ideal in the US Navy. The swimming quals were nerve-wracking since I had never been a good swimmer. I remember climbing the tower used to have the recruits dive in the pool and observing those in front of me who were hesitant to dive in. They got yelled at by the swim instructors. I also remember seeing there were rescue swimmers in the pool waiting to help anyone who needed it once they made the jump. Although I was terrified about not being able to swim very well, I felt determined to not get yelled at when it was my turn. Once I hit the water, I came up and swam as hard as I could to get to the edge. Then came the fun part, doing the required lap around the pool. I struggled to do this. At some point, I had a rescue swimmer come up and tell me I'd failed and to go to the edge of the pool. In an involuntary reaction, I immediately responded, "Fuck you," to the rescue swimmer. The look on his face was priceless. I could see him trying to figure out if he should kick my ass, but he just stayed quiet and swam next to me as I finished my lap. When I finished, he congratulated me and said that I passed. While spitting out water, I tried to say in the nicest way, "Thank you." So I walk out with this canvas messenger bag on. So in my old dungarees, guard belt, canteen, and now a canvas messenger bag. Canteen on the right, bag on the left. I'm actually kind of balanced. Everybody's looking at me. A few more people get called in, and our divisional staff is set up. And then we all have to start moving racks. Our POC has to move up to the front, a rock to the back. I move up to the front. Our POC, when you're looking from the office down the berthing, our POC, the recruit in charge, will be in the top rack on your left. Looking down the berthing, I get the top rack on the right. You go through P days whether you like it or not. Those are processing days. They don't count toward your training, but it is a chance to get all the basic paperwork done, get your uniforms fitted, all that kind of administrative stuff. We had 2 weeks of P days. So that's 2 weeks of getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning, going to PT, running to shower and shave and clean up, run to eat, get into formation, get yelled at, but none of it counted. That was the longest 2 weeks of my life until I actually went to sea. But it's a chance to get stuff done. So when week one starts, you dive straight into training. One thing that that jogged my memory to impart one of this video. When I was watching the video I got from Navy Recruiting Command about the recruits showing up at RTC, of course you see RDCs right in people's faces yelling at them. I never once had an RDC get right in my face yelling at me. And I finally understood why. I honestly never understood it back then. I just didn't ask questions. Jason was 6'6" or 6'7". Told you about him, tall, second tallest guy I ever met. I'm 6'4". The tallest RDC that I ran into, or Jason ran into, was not even 6 feet tall. They were maybe 5'11". So Jason and I are a full head taller than all the RDCs. It's no wonder no one ever got in our face and yelled. Sometimes height helps.
I was one of the second, third, I was within the first 10 companies of females ever to be put in Great Lakes, Illinois. So none of the company commanders there that were males really knew how to handle us women. And we had to go in, and it was during shot week, and we were getting our peanut butter shots, and girls were falling out left and right. Again, we'd only been there maybe a week, 2 weeks at most. Didn't really know anyone. So, girls are crying. Oh my God, she's gonna die. Whatever. I'm over here going, guys, line up before we get in trouble. And, so anyhow, I put everyone in line and whatnot, and the, company commander, one of them, his name was BM1 Pritchard, had me lead them to chow and then lead them back home, which, I called everything on the wrong foot, but we got back. Because the AROC and the RPOC both fell out because they were allergic to peanut butter shots. Anyhow, so we get back and we're cleaning up and we're doing the stuff that we need to be done. And BM1 Pritchard comes and stands in front of me. And I'm not kidding. This is what he sounded like when he talked. And he's like, "Are you the one who led the girls back from chow?" And I was like, "Yes, Petty Officer." Anyhow, he leads me into the office and he's talking with Petty Officer Carney, who had this really thick Brooklyn accent. And he was like, "Oh, so you let people back from chow? You want to be the new A-Rock? You the new A-Rock." Anyhow, so that's how I became A-Rock. And it was just funny how these male petty officers didn't know how to handle the females. The girls would turn on the waterworks and get everything we wanted.
Today, recruits training includes time aboard USS Trayer, a 2/3 size mock-up of an Arleigh Burke-class destroyer. Named for a Navy Cross recipient from World War I, the Trayer provides a hyper-realistic environment for recruits to practice damage control skills in. Everything from flooding to fire to blast damage can be simulated aboard this ship while the recruits are still safely ashore. The simulator that became USS Trayer was on the drawing board back in 1997, and I do remember the RDCs talking about it, but it wouldn't be built for a number of years. However, the other schoolhouses aboard RTC provided the basic level of training we needed, and some of them were surprise favorites. In fact, the firefighting school turned out to be so much fun. To be honest, I thought I was going to be very afraid of the firefighting part. I fell in love with it. It was awesome. And the best part was learning to handle that stupid hose. You watch a firefighting video in the Navy or even civilian firefighters, there's a hose team, several men on that hose because there's a lot of water pressure in that hose trying to kick the hose backward. The nozzleman has the hardest job because they're controlling the nozzle as well as fighting the recoil. So you switch out the nozzle periodically. When it was my first time to handle that stupid nozzle, I was the last one on the hose team, so I have to step forward. Every time we rotate, I'm stepping forward, but it's waiting for me, getting closer, getting closer. Finally, the dreaded nozzle is in my hand. So I go to turn it on, and you can set it to spray a fog, a straight stream, and you'd use these for different things. The fog, for example, creates a wall that blocks heat and smoke and can push it back so you can get further in the compartment. The straight stream is used to break up burning material and try and spread it around so it's not clumped together. And those are just some of the uses of the different settings. The straight stream, of course, puts out the highest recoil. With my luck being what it is, when I get up there, the firefighting instructor tells me, open the straight stream. I've never handled this damn thing before, and the first thing they're going to tell me to do is the hardest one. I have no funny stories about the thing shooting out of my hand. I have no funny stories about getting thrown backwards into the sailors behind me in a comical Keystone Cops rendition of Navy training. What I have was a very shocking moment that I turned it on and felt that kick. And the absolutely amazing discovery that I was in control. I'm holding that hose, that nozzle in place, and it's not getting away from me. That moment of controlling that fire hose, I didn't recognize it for what it was at the time, but that was the first counterpoint to me fainting at the galley when we arrived.
So the boot camp story that I can remember is a bit of a cautionary tale. It's kind of funny, but I used to hate the early morning routine and having to be rushed and jump into my uniform so abruptly. And I thought I was clever one night and decided to just wear my uniform underneath my my sweatpants and sweatshirt. So yeah, I did that a few times, and I got away with it a couple nights. But eventually, I think one time during kind of a patrol, the RDC came in, and she saw a little tuft coming out of my sweatshirt of blue camo, and I was abruptly ripped out of my rack and told to do a bunch of push-ups and jumping jacks and all the punishments they give you. So I received a much more rude awakening than I would have gotten if I would have just done what I was told and sucked it up and got dressed in the morning just like everybody else. So yeah, the lesson I learned there, it's better to do what you're told in boot camp.
Although the Trayer was still far in the future, we did have a ship simulator for deck seamanship training. This is the USS Marlinspike, basically a half model of a small ship. Aboard the Marlinspike, we were taught the difference between things like a windlass, a fairlead, a bollard, and a cleat. We were trained in the different procedures for handling lines. We had to learn the different commands given when you're getting underway or you're tying up a ship. It was all hands-on, it was very effective, and it was a lot of fun. Chief Canales was a hull tech. They are huge into damage control. Petty Officer Wilson is a bosun's mate. They are huge, obviously, into line handling and deck seamanship. You have the damage control Olympics and the seamanship Olympics at boot camp. Chief Canales took it very personally when we came in absolutely dead last place during the damage control Olympics, and he made sure we paid for it. Next week is the seamanship Olympics. Excellent. Except Division 501 and 502 were torpedoed again and once again came in last place, and Petty Officer Wilson made sure we paid for it. Yeah, those were some beatdowns, all right.
At this time, the United States Navy still maintained 3 separate locations for training: Orlando, Florida, Great Lakes outside Chicago, and San Diego, California. Recruit Training Command, or more commonly known as RTC-NTC, is now called Liberty Station and used for commercial development. I'll focus on a single notable memory I have during my service week when I was working in the galley, helping prepare the meals to feed thousands of fresh recruits, learning what it means to be a sailor in those 8 hectic weeks. The chow hall faced a massive paved parade field used for physical fitness, marching, running, and it was something called the grinder. I think the structure is still visible on Google Earth. On the opposite side of the grinder was an administrative building, one time housing offices and the USO. This is not even a full year after a certain celebrated aviational themed movie was filmed around Southern California that was released the previous spring and summer. Of course, I'm referring to Top Gun. Within this office building was the very bathroom that the famous scene between Tom Cruise and McKelly McGillis was filmed. Just outside the door was a brass plaque marking the spot as a filming location. I had no idea when I reported aboard I would clean that bathroom at one point and get to lean against the very counter where Maverick and Charlie size each other. Great fun.
The one story that jumps out ahead of all others is a game of 4D chess I played with Petty Officer Wilson. I don't remember where the division was. They were out, but I was back in the compartment doing some pay record issues, and I couldn't be there alone, so Petty Officer Wilson was in the office with me while Chief Canales and Petty Officer Moore, our trainee RDC, were out with the division. I'm at a little World War II type of desk doing yeoman work, correcting names and socials and that crap, because I got to take some of this record to dispersing that afternoon to make sure people's pay doesn't get screwed up again. Petty Officer Wilson gets out and goes and walks out in the berthing and starts looking around. And I glance out the window and I see, him in the berthing, and he walks up to my locker. Okay. Walks up to somebody else's and he's kind of going down. He comes back in and sits down. I don't think anything of it. I'm working. He gets up again and goes out there, and I glance out there and did a double take because he's actually poking at my locker. Okay, well, maybe he just wanted to double check his inspection. He comes to sit back down. I'm working. He gets up a third time, walks out the door. I glance out the window. The hell is he? Son of a. He's actually moving things in my locker as he pokes them. This is boot camp. Everything in those lockers has to be down to the millimeter. Every time he touched something, he moved it, which means things are now getting out of standard. I knew exactly what he was doing in that moment. He's setting us up to fail. It's one of those boot camp games. He comes and sits down. He gets up and goes out and pokes around a little more and pokes around. And I'm watching now. He goes about 3 racks back. And okay, you got a rack and a rack with a locker in the middle. So it basically makes a little cube. Once you get about 3 cubes back, you can't see anybody anymore unless they're right in the middle of the compartment. Right? Otherwise, if they're behind the racks, you can't see them. As soon as he went out of sight, I was up. I ran to my locker space, fixed all my stuff, fixed everybody in my locker space, and was about to go to the office. And I thought, crap, I can't just fix these guys. I got to take care of those guys. Ran to the cube on the other side, fix their stuff. He hadn't come back, at least that I could see. I was able to fix 6 queues before I'm pushing. I got to get back in the office and sit down and get back to work. Get back to work. He comes back in and he doesn't even look at me, just sits down. But he's starting to steam. Or at least that's the performance he's giving. Working. He gets up and walks around and back out there. And I look out there and I see him poking and poking and poking. Definitively. So as he's out of sight, I'm up like a shot. I run out there, fix my stuff. I could take care of 6 cubes before I started to hear him come back and I had to get to the office. And he sits down behind me and I'm working. I can feel his eyeballs burning holes in the back of my neck. He knows what I'm doing. I know he knows what I'm doing. He knows I know, he knows I know. And I know he knows, I know, he knows, I know, he knows. You know? He gets up again, stalks out there, and now he's moving things in my locker and the others. Here we go again. As soon as he's out of sight, I jump out there, run, put everything back, put everything back, put everything back, run back to my desk, sit down. That's when I hear it. Son of a bitch! I jump out there and look out the window, and there goes a pair of pants. Whoosh! And a shirt. Whoosh! There goes a hat. Whoosh! Like, okay, I bury myself in my work as he stalks in now, sits down at his desk, and he's grumbling. God dang, fricka, what? Fill in your curse words. He gets up and stalks out there. Of course, I'd already fixed my stuff, so I'm like, okay, my stuff's good. The 6, they're good. He goes back. God damn! I look over there, and here goes a pillow. Whoosh! And a blanket. Whoosh! More clothes. Whoosh! Whoosh! It's just a hurricane. It's like a tornado's going through the compartment. And it's like that scene in the first Ghostbusters back in '85 where books are flying off the shelf in sequence down. As I'm watching, I can see stuff flying off in sequence that he shows up. It's just this tornado going down the berthing. So I jump up while he's doing that, run out there, make sure my stuff and the other 6 cubes are good, run back, sit down. By the time the division came back, all of their stuff was in a pile in the middle of the deck. Mattresses, blankets, shaving kits, uniforms, everything. I don't remember what they were doing, but when they came back, they were in a really good mood. They were walking in, having a good time. I mean, not being boisterous, but yeah, they clearly had a good time. What the hell happened? Something snapped in me at that moment as everybody's staring and Petty Officer Wilson's starting to berate people about the condition of their lockers. I just decided I am not going to get beat down for this crap. If I'm going to get beat down later, it's because I deserve it. Boot camp logic. Oh, hey, I got a reason to get out of here. I got pay records to take to dispersing. So I get up and I can't just walk out here by myself. There's got to be crap. There's nothing I can do now. I've done everything. I can save one person. I can save one person. I get Jake. Hey, come here. Get your bag. We got to go to dispersing. I need your help to turn these records into dispersing. His locker was one of the ones I was able to save. Get our covers on, get our bags on, sign out the board, and we leave. Get downstairs. We got the back quarterdeck on the grinder. That's the recruit entrance. We're on the grinder, and we hear from the 3rd deck where our berthing is. God damn it, drop! Jake looks at me as we're walking. I said, Petty Officer Wilson's playing games. We go to personnel, get the pay records turned in. We might have spent half an hour to 45 minutes just marching in circles around the base, looking like we were going somewhere. we'd been gone about a total of maybe an hour and a half when we finally decided we can't put this off anymore. Time to go back. I'm pretty sure Jake isn't going to get in trouble for any of this, but I know a beatdown's coming for me. But at least this is a beatdown I'm going to deserve. So we march back upstairs, hang up our bags, sign in. Jake goes does his stuff, and before I can do anything, Senior Recruit Miller, report. Crap. Here we go. So I walk into the office, knock, knock, Senior Recruit Miller reporting. Step in, close the door. He's staring at me. Miller, do you know why I let you get out of here today? Those pay records could have been done tomorrow. I knew what you were doing. Trying to sound a little more sure of myself than I actually was, I responded, I'm sure you did, petty officer, but I'm not sure why you let me go. Miller, if I could get half of them mofos to get their eyes off their own asses and look out for their shipmates like you did today, this Navy would be a hell of a lot better place. Dismissed. I headed back out and went on with my life. And of course, the next day we got beat down for something else. That story is the core of everything I learned at boot camp. It is the core of what boot camp for enlisted personnel and officer training for officers, that is what the core of what they're trying to teach us. What kept me out of trouble was the fact I didn't just take care of myself. I took care of it. I did what little I could for the few that I could, right down to getting Jake out of the compartment before the beatdown. As I've gotten older, and this was even before the autism diagnosis, but long before that, as I gotten older, I began to realize when I first thought of boot camp, I wasn't thinking about fainting on that first day anymore. I wasn't even thinking about the sense of, oh my God, I'm in trouble when they made me the divisional yeoman. The first memory, the first story that always comes to mind is that game of 4D chess with Petty Officer Wilson. I don't know if he expected me to do what I did. I really don't. I wish I'd asked him, but clearly I did the right thing. Older I get, the more I realize that was probably the single greatest moment in boot camp for me. The moment when, for me at least, as a recruit, it all came together.
I remember getting to boot camp July 1st when I flew from Phoenix, Arizona, got off the plane in Chicago, and rode the bus up to Great Lakes. I remember getting there, and those first couple of days were extremely busy. Here it is, July 4th now, and the biggest thing that I miss from being home at that time was listening to the fireworks getting shot off around us and not being able to enjoy spending time with the family or seeing them.
Battle stations is the final graduation exercise for boot camp. Today, the recruits spend most of battle stations aboard the simulator USS Trayer with some events at other places on base. We didn't have the Trayer in my day, but we still went through the same events. The one event that really sticks in my head, though, was our escape scuttle drill. Now, an escape scuttle is a small round scuttle or hatch that's in a bulkhead, in another hatch, or in the deck, or in the overhead that lets you have an escape route. But it's narrow, and a man of my size, with my shoulder width, I have to, cram in. Our escape scuttle drill was done using plywood. This video clip I found shows Division 44 going through the escape scuttle drill during battle stations in January of 1999. This is just a year and a half after I went through it in November of 1997. This is the environment we trained in, and these pieces of plywood were our red-hot escape scuttles. The scenario was based on the horrible fire suffered by USS Forrestal CV-59 back in the 1960s. The drill required us to get all of our personnel from one side to the other through the scuttle without touching it because the metal's hot enough to burn us. All we had on us to use in the scenario were our uniforms, but we're also wearing our utility jackets, which is a uniform item. And the utility jacket is fire retardant. It's not fireproof. It will burn, but it takes a minute or two to get there. The idea being it gives you some protection to get out of the space. I don't know if the RDCs did this intentionally or not. I kind of think they might have. Division 501 and 502, we were training together. So when they divided us up for the teams for the escape scuttle, my small group ended up with myself and Jason, the kid who was 6'6", 6'7", as well as the shortest members of our combined division, both of whom were females from 502. So our group, you had a couple of females who were short, so short you can't see my hand on camera, and then myself and Jason. We piled our utility jackets on top of the scuttle, the material to insulate it. So we picked up the shortest female and pretty much threw her through, and she landed and somersaulted. Picked up the next shortest female, tossed her through. Picked up our shortest male, got him through, and the two females grabbed him and pulled him through. And we worked up the height line that way. So we got taller people on the other side slowly as we got to the taller people on my side. Finally, it was down to just Jason and me. Jason cupped his hands, grabbed my heel, and boosted me through, and I went through, was carried through by the others. That left Jason alone on the other side. Never forget what this kid did. He stepped back, ran forward a couple steps, and Supermaned right through that scuttle so we could catch him. And we did, got him through. None of us got, quote unquote, burned. We moved on with battle stations. Always love that memory. Battle stations is a 12-hour event, but it technically starts around 1800 at night, but you're up at 4 o'clock in the morning the day you start it for normal PT and chow and training. So you're effectively running around for 24 hours. And we had a great time that night. It was a lot of fun. And it was a moment that, at least for me, I hope for others, really showed that we learned not just a lot of individual skills, but that all these individual skills fitted together into a toolbox with which we could solve problems and complete the mission in the fleet. We finish that up, and then we have what's called the cap ceremony. Recruit caps are issued to you when you get your first uniform items, and you are told you are not a United States sailor, you are a recruit. If you call yourself a sailor while you're wearing this, all hell breaks loose. You haven't earned it. After battle stations, we have breakfast, and we go back and form up on our grinder. I think, if I remember right, the command master chief for the base came down. I don't remember. A couple of the more senior level chiefs were there, gave us the speech. Congratulations, you went through battle stations. You may now call yourself sailors. You're still going to be treated like you're in boot camp. Still get up at 4 in the morning, PT, eat formation because you're still here under our care. But the only thing you have left is graduation and going. At which point, we were allowed to take these caps off and we were issued the Navy ball cap. This is the one I was issued that day. Early November, well, mid-November 1997. Most of the guys got the newer one. This was one of the old ones in the inventory. The newer ones that most of the gang got was a slightly bigger cap. The word Navy was in taller, thinner letters that were a brighter gold. This is one of the older ones. I'm really glad I got this because I always thought it looked cool. The next several days were pretty relaxed by boot camp standards. Our schedule was still regimented, but we were beginning to out-process as we got nearer to graduation. The last movie I ever saw as a civilian was George of the Jungle. Well, one night, Chief Canales brought a videotape in for us to watch a movie in our berthing. So the first movie I got to see as a sailor in the United States Navy was 1997's Batman and Robin. Now, Batman and Robin is probably the weakest entry in the Batman franchise, and that's being very generous. But I've always had a fondness for the movie, not the least of which because it's the first film I saw as a sailor while getting ready to leave boot camp and head out to the fleet. I now have the privilege of presenting to you some of the memories of the only other person from Division 501 I'm still in touch with, former Air Traffic Controlman 2nd Class Jake Stout. Jake was our educational petty officer. He and I worked very closely together during boot camp, and frankly, he's one of the reasons I was able to keep my sanity. He sent me these recollections to read to you, so here's another window into somebody else's experience in Division 501. I learned, like many others after a few days in Great Lakes, to just do what I was told and how I was told to do it. Easy, right? That was my plan, and it worked. Lay low as possible and stay under the radar. After a number of weeks and suffering through many make-it-rain sessions caused by fellow recruits, I had my part figured out. Now I just had to get the rest of my division on board. Then the RDC came out one day and jumped my ass for doing everything right "Stout," he said. "You think you're better than everybody else?" "Absolutely not," I replied. "Well, go ahead and drop," he ordered. After many push-ups, sit-ups, and who knows what the hell else, he finally let me stop. In the end, I took pride knowing I had done my best, and knowing the RDC knew it, even if he had an interesting way of showing it. Graduation is a formal pass and review ceremony. The graduating divisions march in formation through the main drill hall, passing in review before the official party. Following this are the requisite speeches. The local admiral speaks, the commanding officer of the naval station, and then any guest speakers, with the ceremony culminating in all personnel reciting the Sailor's Creed. Being that it was now late November, we were all in our dress blues, and having all of those sailors, enlisted and officer, in their dress blues in this beautiful drill hall really made it feel about as Navy a day as possible. You don't leave boot camp immediately after the graduation ceremony. First, you have Liberty Weekend, which is your first Liberty time since coming to boot camp. My folks weren't able to make my graduation because of some family obligations that came up, but Jake's parents were able to attend. They were kind enough to invite me to come with them into Chicago for the weekend, so I got to explore Chicago with Jake and his parents, and it made the weekend a whole lot of fun. We went to the top of the Willis Tower. I was alive when the damn thing was built. I'm sorry, I still call it the Sears Tower. Highest I've ever been inside a man-made structure that wasn't an airplane. One of the ironies a lot of sailors get to experience, and Jake and I were no different, is that the first warship we set foot aboard as United States sailors was a captured enemy ship. The submarine U-505 was a German U-boat captured by the escort carrier USS Guadalcanal back in 1944. It's on display at the Museum of Science and Industry. Of course, we toured it, so the first ship we set foot aboard as part of our Navy was a warship from somebody else's Navy. They also had a really beautiful exhibit on the artwork of Charles Schulz, the artist, the cartoonist who drew Peanuts, created Charlie Brown and Snoopy. I always loved his works. That was a really neat exhibit to get to see. We get to the airport to fly out on Thanksgiving Day, 1997. This time I was dressed for the flight. I had my dress uniform on, had my pea coat. I was not going to freeze on the airplane that time as I flew back to Florida. Called home to say happy Thanksgiving. Mom and dad are on the phone. I can hear my brother in the background, some family friends. I grew up in the Air Force. Now, my dad wasn't gone as much as a lot of people's, but he was gone a good bit here or there. This was when the kick in the gut hit me. Pop's home. He's retired. I'm now the one who's not there for the holiday. I'm now the one in uniform who's on orders with a mission somewhere else. It's one of those moments you know is coming. You know intellectually it's there, but until you experience it, there's really no way to describe the pit of the stomach, the hammer dropping into the pit of the stomach for just a moment and realize that this is real. It's my turn and I'm the one going out on the proverbial front lines now. That was a very sobering moment, but it didn't last. After I hung up, I gave myself a few minutes to really be sad, but then I went and caught up with Jake and the other guys, got on the airplane when it was time, began our adventures in the United States Navy. I want to thank everybody, all of you who contributed your memories to this production. I had a lot of fun finding out what struck you all about boot camp. And to you, my audience, thank you for your time. I hope you enjoyed this look at my boot camp adventures and the window into the lives of my shipmates and my friends who've been through similar experiences. Until we meet here again on Sparks 1524, have a great holiday season as it gets ready to come upon us. Be safe. Always go and do some great things.
Anyway, my biggest problem that I had in basic was because I was older and I wasn't really intimidated. The TIs ranting and raving kind of knew what was going to come. And I had trouble during inspections, barracks inspections, when they were going person to person and looking up and down. And I had trouble not smiling. They were always on me about that. But I got in trouble once in the middle of an instruction session. where he started talking about something, and I kind of laughed. And he goes, "You think this is funny?" Oh, no, sir. He says, "Well, I do. Get your ass up against the wall and push on it like you're a train." And so I'm like, okay. I had trouble not smiling at that because that's. And so I was there pushing on the wall until he said stop. The obstacle course, and that was fun. I waited for that because I wanted to see how I could do. We ran through trails and there was water and ropes to swing across. Then we came to this one thing where they had logs horizontally stacked this way, like stairs, and you had to go over one, under the other, not real high, but and when you went under, you had to swing and grab the other and pull yourself up. And my little 135-pound frame, there was a guy in front of me and he could not swing under. So I was pushing him from my perch, pushing him so he could get up on the other before I swung over that. So that went well. I was proud of myself for that. Comes to the end of basic training, and your mother, so she drove up this.
No, you two have been married just like 3 months when.
Something like that. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, because you went in September and y'all got married in March.
Yeah, right.
April, May, June, July, August. Wow, 6 months.
Yeah, it was 6 months. So she came down to visit me, and we had passes because we were right at the end there. I go out to meet her, and she had acquired a little dog. Some poor little dog that was being abused in somebody's yard. She just snatched him. Baby girl was her name. So she came out there, and I took the leash from the dog, and I held my wife's hand, and we were walking towards the common area, wherever we're allowed to go. And then from the orderly room, there was, "Airman Miller, get in here." So I go bouncing in there, and "What do you think you're doing?" That's what my wife said. "There's 2 things you don't do down here in basic training. You don't hold your wife's hand, and you don't hold the dog leash." "Yes, sir."
We were formed up in 2 parallel lines facing each other. And this is when the RDCs started getting really serious about welcoming us to boot camp. If they noticed somebody with their toe slightly over the line. Oh, crap. Hang on. Hey, Pop. No, what's up? What's going on? Well, one night I was standing fire watch at the fort end of the berthing. And aside from trying to stay awake at like 2 o'clock in the morning, I'm reading and trying to memorize the 11 general orders of a century when somebody. Crap. There's somebody at the door. Okay, graduation, take 3. Walk down the stairway, out the back quarter deck on the grinder, and as we hit the grinder, we hear from the 3rd deck where our berthing was, "God damn it, drop!" And Jake looks at me and I said, "Petty Officer Wilson's playing games." So we go to personnel, and get the pay record straightened out, and spent maybe half an. Oh, crap. Do what we're told when we're told and not get noticed. Great plan. Except when the RDCs call you in the office and tell you that office. I need to. Jake is the only member of Division 501 I'm still in touch with. Now, We did kind of drift apart over the years as our careers went in different directions, but during the pandemic, we were. Hello?